Hello and welcome to this Oak Tree English video on 5 books that shaped me. Books are magical portals into other worlds. I've deeply enjoyed visiting some of those worlds, and I would like to share with you 5 of the books that shaped me and impacted my life. You will have your own top 5 list, and I warmly invite you to share that in the comments section. Some books are a given, such as the Bible, NIV for my preference, other translations also good, and Shakespeare, and I'm not going to talk about them today. The following books are ones that have impacted me personally and are also surprisingly accessible to people for whom English is a second language or who don't normally enjoy reading. Let's visit our first world. The first world I want to visit is Narnia. I'm cheating a little here since there are actually 7 books charting the history of this world from creation straight through to final destruction. It wasn't written, as many think, as an allegory like Pilgrim's Progress, which narrowly missed this list, but rather as supposition. Suppose there were a magic world with talking animals and mythical beings. What would the events of history look like in that world? How would ultimate reality manifest in such a land? Then the author, C.S. Lewis, introduces some children from our world so that children in our world can experience this marvellous country through their eyes. It transported me as a child. Then as an adult, I wrote my master's dissertation on it. So Narnia really has had an enormous impact on my life. As they are children's books, they're easy to read, although some of the allusions to clothes and modes of speech may feel a little dated since they are about 70 years old now. The next world I invite you to join me in is Middle-earth. I recommend starting with another children's book, The Hobbit, which introduces another world of myth and magic with a deep and complex history, language and folklore. The author, J.R.R. Tolkien, was a close friend of C.S. Lewis, and they were in a writers' group at Oxford called the Inklings. They met in various pubs around the town and decried the lack of the sorts of books they would really like to read. And so they wrote them. The Hobbit was only published due to the Inklings' insistence that it really was very good. And it is. It tells a story of an unlikely hero going on a perilous quest and showing that there are qualities other than being big and strong that can be equally or more valuable in adventures. It hints at a deeper history to the world it creates, which the subsequent trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, explores in much greater depth. If you want more than that, then you can go even into the Silmarillion or Unfinished Tales, but you don't need to. This was the first book that I read where the words melted away before my eyes, and I felt like I was watching a film as my brain processed the words. This was before the films actually came out. The description is astonishingly detailed, which, to be fair, can put people off. But the quality of writing, the intricacy of story, and the richness of the characters make this set of books extremely worth reading. Another book that changed my view of the world is 1984 by George Orwell. It was written in 1948, see what he did there, just after the Second World War, when the world was recovering from one totalitarian government and struggling with another. 1984 is a critique of totalitarianism. That is when one ideology or party controls every aspect of everyone's life. This can happen at any ideological extreme. Think of the horrors of the far-right Nazi Germany and compare it to the equal brutality of the far-left communist Russia. It can also be true of religious ideologies, such as the enormous evils being perpetrated by the Iranian Islamist regime against women at the moment, or the intolerance of the atheist regime in China, where hundreds of thousands of Uyghur Muslims are being held in concentration camps. Anywhere that an ideology of any type tries to control every aspect of your life, Brutality must necessarily follow. And 1984 is a stark prediction and warning to Orwell's readers of exactly this. It follows the plight of Winston Smith, who lives in a state where Big Brother is always watching. That's where it comes from. And tries to assert, in many small ways, his own individuality. This is the book that woke me up to the impact that political ideas have on our daily life, and made me much more interested in politics, if only to look out for Big Brother. The next book on the list is much lighter in some ways than 1984, but also much deeper. Sophie's World by Jostein Gaarder opened my mind to philosophy. It's a crash course in the history and development of philosophy, wrapped up in a story of a young girl who then has to apply the philosophical lessons she's learning to the real world. With this as a springboard, I started reading a lot more philosophy and began to understand not only what I thought, but why I thought it. It was my entrance to ethics and metaphysics in a way that I, as an ordinary young boy, not particularly bright, but able to read, could actually understand. I strongly recommend this book to anyone who wants to think about the world, but might get lost in Plato's Republic or Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. It is highly readable and of inestimable value. Finally, I would like to recommend the BBC book, The Nation's Favourite Poems. A little bit different, doesn't have a coherent story, but is beautiful. As a child, my father would read or recite poems to me, almost exclusively written by Rudyard Kipling. My neighbour was also a Kipling fan, because he did write exceedingly good poems. So I grew up blissfully unaware that other poets even existed. Then I bought this book on a whim. Every bookcase in the world should have a copy of this book. It compiles 100 poems, ranked by popularity with Kipling's If in first place, and going through many different genres, topics and ages. There are modern poems by living poets like Alan Arberg, Please Mrs. Butler, and poems by older poets like Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds to shake the... Get on with it, Tim. Okay, sorry. Some are populist in nature, like Lear's The Owl and the Pussycat, or Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. But they can also be deeply poignant, like Dulce et Decorum Est by Wilfred Owen, war poet that, don't read it late at night. If you want a good overview of English poetry and also understand what Britain's literary taste is, then this book is indispensable. It's also a wonderful thing to dip into when you're at a loose end. If you want to see some of these poems read, check out some of the poem videos I've made on this channel. I hope this video has been interesting for you, and that you may have picked your next reading project. These are my suggestions of books that changed my life. But what about you? What books are on your formative list? Please leave a comment below and give your book and why it's worth reading. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please remember to like, share and subscribe to Oak Tree English. Goodbye.